Hi, it's Andy, and today I'm bringing you my 2023 stats and 2023 favourites. It is finally time to go over all of my stats. I've decided to tack my favourites onto the end of this video and not do a separate favourites video just because to be perfectly honest, in my planning, I don't really have room for another video without doing an extra video, and I can't be bothered when I can just tack them on the end. I'm not going to go over too many stats, it's not going to be long-winded, so I feel like it's, you know, appropriate to just pop these on the end. I'm not going to be doing least favourites or disappointments or anything like that like other people do, because for the ones that I DNF'd or didn't like, I don't really have anything constructive to say, so I feel like I just shouldn't say anything. Let's put it that way. So kicking off with some stats. In the year 2023, I read 180 books. I do have all the details over there, which is why I'm going to keep looking over there. I read 180 books. I DNF'd 10, so I started 190. I DNF'd 10, so I completed fully 180 books, which came out to 63,733 pages. I don't know why I keep doing this, I'm sorry, I'll stop. My best month was March, where I read 31 books for Marvelathon. And my worst month was September, where I read 8 books. Just to make it really interesting, or what I find really interesting, is that I also hauled exactly 180 books. So I read 180 books, I hauled 180 books. That doesn't mean my TBR is down 180 books, because I reread some books and I also hauled some books that I'd already read, so it doesn't match up that way, but I thought that was just an interesting stat. And of the 180 books that I hauled this year, I have read 108 of them, so 60% of my books hauled in 2023 were either books that I read before and were just getting like hard copies or special editions, etc., or books that I then read, so I kept track of that. I think that's pretty good going. 60% of my books, like I do have I have like a TBR that's under 100, so it's not, you know, it's not surprising that I can read that many, but I have been getting really excited for new releases, so I have been reading them a lot faster than like leaving them on my TBR for ages. So the things that have been there for ages are staying there for longer, but the new stuff is getting read. So we'll see if I can mix it up in 2024 so that I can get some of those backlists off my TBR. Now for the categories, which these numbers do include my DNFs. So for the year of 2023, I picked up 95 science fiction and fantasy books, which is 50% overall of my entire year, which to me I thought was pretty surprising, because I don't see myself as an SFF reader, and I've lumped them all together. So what I've done, I've really like lumped my categories in together. So if it was paranormal, mythology, sci-fi, fantasy of any version, I've put it all into sci-fi fantasy. Like I've lumped it all into one genre, as it were. It's not a genre, it is a genre, but these books are more than that genre. But I have narrowed it down to, if it's not contemporary or non-fiction, it's fantasy, if that makes sense. Like contemporary, historical, non-fiction, fantasy is kind of how I've lumped it. So like these ones, for example, would be paranormal. Even though they're set in our world with paranormal elements, I've put them as fantasy. Some of the sci-fi on here I've lumped in with that SFF as well. The mythology, Percy Jackson books that I reread, they are all under the SFF umbrella. So I've lumped it down so that I could get like a really broad look over, so it's not too detailed. So 50% of what I read was in the science fiction and fantasy lump that I've made. Romance and contemporary were the next. I have lumped them kind of together but also not. So 39 books, which is 20.5% of what I read, is purely romance. So the romance is the focus. And then for the contemporaries, it's 17 books, which is 8.9%, where even though there might be romance in it, the contemporary story is the main point of it. So the romance isn't the reason for the book. So I've done it that way. But again, like that's still 29% of my reading is contemporary romance, which contemporary/romance, which again, it surprised me that it was so low. I don't know. And for non-fictions, I read 18 non-fictions this year, which were 9.5% of my reading. I'm quite excited about that. I am really enjoying my non-fiction. Like, I've kind of gone into a deep dive on non-fiction this year for some reason. I wonder how many non-fiction I read last year. If I have a detail of how many non-fiction I read in 2022 compared to 2023, Edit and Andy, please put it up there. If not, there. Of the representation of my books that I'm reading, 50.5% of books had characters who were part of the LGBTQ+ group. So that could have been side characters, that could have been main characters. If I saw them on page and they were LGBT, non-binary, any kind of spectrum of gender or sexuality, they tick that box. And I do have a breakdown of main character or just present in the text, but I didn't break that down on these stats. For the disability rep within the books that I have read, I was slightly more, I want to say I was slightly more tough on that category. So I had to be sort of convinced that the characters were disabled, not just like, for example, I did include mental health, so it wasn't just that the situation was making them anxious, it was that they actually had anxiety, because they're like, that's two different things. So I broke this down into, again, I've got more details on my spreadsheet, but I broke it down into mental, physical and both. So all in all, out of all the books I read, 41.8% had disability rep in some form in the books. Of those books, 31.5% was a mental disability, so that'd be mental health issues. I also included things like Alzheimer's and dementia, etc. Anything that is mentally based, I've included in the mental section of my statistics. 49.4% of that was a physical disability, so things like EDS like I have, if it was a wheelchair user, if it was a limb difference, anything that caused your physical ability to be altered in some way due to a disability, I put in the physical category. And then 19% had both physical and mental components within the book. So it may be that, for example, there's a book in here, a book that I read where one of the characters had been a soldier. It's actually two of the books, but this one character in particular. So he was a soldier and he lost a leg while he was over fighting. I don't remember where he was, but he has disability because he has a prosthetic leg, and he also has PTSD, so he has both. He has a mental disability and a physical disability, and yeah, so that's how I've done that. So 31.5% was purely mental, 49.4% was physical, and 19% of the books I read had both mental and physical and that's of the 41.8%. I'm hoping that I'll remember to put the stats here as I'm saying them, so, you know, and maybe even over here, so I've got a lot of room to play with. For the breakdown of my authors, I wanted to look at the breakdown of the genders of the authors that I was reading this year. 73.2% were women, or identified as women, 13.7% identified as male, and 11.1%, which is really satisfying, identified as non-binary in some way. So that could be if they are using they, them pronouns, or she, them, or he, them, he, they, she, they, etc. Anything that was not she, her, or he, him is what I put under the non-binary. So that is quite a lot of space, but like I say, it's 11.1% non-binary authors. And 2.1% of the books I read this year had multiple authors. So again, I kind of wish I could flesh this out a bit, because it might have been 2 men, 2 women, people of different genders, like, but yeah, it was only a couple of books I think that had that, and one of them I know was 2 guys because it was Clanlands, so, you know. Again, author-wise, new authors, I read 52 new authors, which consisted of 27.4% of my reads, and 138 authors, which is 72.6% that I had read from before. Now, I did read good chunk of series this year, I think. And I did reread books quite a lot this year. So yeah, I'm not really... I want to say I'm not surprised, but I do feel slightly surprised that I feel like I've not branched out. Again, I'm not sure what my year before was like, but yeah, I don't know how many individual authors. I didn't actually look at that, because this also includes like ones that I've reread. So like the 10, for example, Percy Jackson books that I reread, 10 of those numbers are Rick Riordan. So it's, I kind of wish I'd broken it down a bit more, but oh well. So those are all the stats that I've taken down for you today. Those are the ones that I really wanted to share. Like I say, I have more on my spreadsheet just for me, that I have lots of different breakdowns so that I can look at my reading and see where my reading is going. I also have all of the stats across from that as well, like included in that show how I rated those authors and how I rated those genres, etc. And that tells me where to guide my reading, but it doesn't really bode telling you about, because it doesn't really matter. Like, what does it matter if I gave X author a 3-star when I read their book and Y author 5 stars? Doesn't really matter. For me, it's all about trying to hone in on my reading taste, because this year my reading taste has changed very dramatically, and I'm kind of, I feel like a balloon without a string. Yeah. Next up, I'm going to go over my favourite books. I have actually managed to reduce it down to a top 10-ish. Top 10-ish. There are 2 series in there, and I will not make you will not make me choose. You're not going to make me choose a favourite. It's not going to happen. It kind of happens. But it's not, you know, I'll just start. These are in no particular order. It's just the order that I have flapped them down on my desk to talk about them. The first is a series that is a sci-fi. That is the first proper sci-fi that I've really, really enjoyed, other than The Martian, but I didn't read that this year. And that is the Becky Chambers Wayfarer series. Now, the first one in this is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Why can I never get that right? I would be really hard pressed to tell you my favourite. I think it's possibly Record of a Spaceborne Few. I think it kind of goes like 2, 1, 3, 4 in order of favourites. But overall, I just love this series, and I couldn't choose between them when it came to choosing a favourite for this. The Wayfarer series follows our crew on the Wayfarer, which is a ship that punches holes in the universe to create wormholes. So it punches a hole here, punches a hole here, and these holes connect. It's a lot more complicated than that, but you know, that's how I can describe it. And the first book follows Rosemary as she joins the crew of the Wayfarer, and you learn about how Earth, or how humans went into space and met all these aliens and started these new colonies and joined these new like galactic communities and things like that. And this is spent mostly just on the Wayfarer. So they're going to punch a hole through to this planet, and they have to go the long way round because the space between it is very unstable, and so they need to be at the other end to punch back the way rather than going that way, basically. So it's just them on the ship, getting to know the characters, getting to know the species, getting to know the history, as Rosemary kind of also learns it and discusses it, and it's just, nothing happens. It's so, well, things do happen, but it's really low stakes, and I really, really liked it. I always say to people, if you're looking for a fast-paced, action-packed sci-fi, this is not it. This is like almost cozy sci-fi with a little bit of like, okay, bits in it, and that's really it. The next one follows, which is A Record of a Spaceborne Few. It follows one of the ships that came from Earth. They're almost like closed system ships. So people escaped on these. They're kind of like arcs almost, and the people that were on here stayed in these ships, and like that was their community. It was like a mini Earth away from Earth. So they would recycle everything, recycle their dead, recycle their metals and paper, everything gets reused. They've got water reclaimers. They've been living on these ships for hundreds of years as an isolated sort of peoples, and this is all kind of about their records and their history and the importance of history. And I just really, really enjoyed it. There was something about it. By the time I got to the end of it, I was like, yes, yes. And also, they compost people. They compost their dead so they can reuse it for farming and stuff. And as someone who would like to be composted as a corpse, I very much appreciate that. The third one, A Close and Common Orbit, follows Pepper, who you meet in the first one, and it is Pepper's backstory, basically, how Pepper got to where she is. It also follows another character who we meet in the first one, who I'm not going to tell you who it is because it will spoil something from the first one. I also can't remember the character's name, but that's fine. You meet someone in the first one and their story is told in A Close and Common Orbit, but mainly it's about Pepper, and I really, really enjoyed it, but there was just a little bit of disconnect for me with this one because I'm not as intrigued by the characters. And then The Galaxy and the Ground Within is the last of the four, and this follows again another character that you meet in the first one who you don't really get to see that much, so you now get to see them in a lot more detail, and they go to this stopping off point to sort of refuel, kind of like a service station but in space, you know. But there is an asteroid shower or a solar flare or something that ends up grounding them on this planet, and they are in this bubble. This planet is made up of these bubbles, which are all the different sort of service stations, and they are trapped with some other people in this bubble, and each of the species, the sort of 5 different species that are trapped in here, there's only 5 or 6 people, don't really understand each other and have like preconceived notions of the other and prejudices, and it's about them getting to know each other as just people and getting over those prejudices, and I just really, really enjoyed it. But again, there was just a slight disconnect for me with the characters. So yeah, the second one was definitely my favourite because it's really, really about the characters. The first one, again, really, really about the characters, but there was something about the second one. But yeah, this is one of my favourite all-time series from now on, and you can take it from my cold dead hands when I'm composted. And the next series that, again, you're going to have to fight me to make me really, really choose a favourite, is the Chestnut Springs series by Elsie Silver. There are 5 books in this series. It kind of follows a family, so it follows the brothers. So there is 3 brothers. There's Rhett, Bo and Cade, and then the family kind of adopted in Jasper, and then Theo is Rhett's protege because Rhett is a bullfighter, and he then goes on to like he more ends up coaching Theo. So the books are, so this one is Rhett's, then Cade's, then Jasper, then Theo, and then Bo. And again, like, there are things about these books, each of these books, that I just love, but the thing about Elsie Silver is that she just got better every book she wrote. So I think Hopeless, Hopeless is probably my favourite, followed by Reckless, followed by Heartless, followed by Flawless, followed by Powerless, but it's because I'm not so keen on Jasper. But I mean, I like him as a I like him as a character. I think the characters are done really, really well, but like as a person, I'm blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so these basically are romances based on that. So we've got Rhett, who is a bull rider who got himself in trouble, and his boss sends someone to babysit him, and it's his boss's daughter, and obviously he's supposed to keep his hands off her, and that does not happen. So it's about them getting together. Cade is a single dad who needs help, and so Summer from the first one sends her best friend to help be a nanny for his son, and of course, you know, they end up together. But Cade has been told so many times that he is heartless, but it's because he is the eldest brother. He watched his mum die, giving birth to his sister. He has had so much heartbreak in his life, and because he's the oldest, his sort of thing is to shut down. Like, he can't show anybody else that he is hurting because he needs to look after them. So from the outside, people think that he's heartless, hence the Heartless. Powerless is about Jasper. Jasper was kind of not quite orphaned, but left by his parents and was homeless, living in his car during high school, and was being picked on one day, and Bo, who is the youngest of the kids, or not the second youngest, I think Rhett's the youngest. Anyway, Bo, who is one of the brothers, was like, hell nah, you're coming home with me. So he brought him home and he was kind of adopted in. But because of that, Jasper has this fear of being powerless, and so in everything he does, it has to be more dominating. He's a hockey player, he's a hockey goalie, and to him that is a way of finding control. And then when Bo, who's a soldier, who we'll talk about in a minute, goes missing, that is the ultimate feeling of powerlessness. his best friend, his brother, his like soulmate effectively, has gone missing and is in danger across enemy lines, and nobody knows what's happening to him, so he basically just freaks out. But it's about him, and I can't remember the person's name. The cousin of the brothers. It's not his cousin because he's not related. Violet, I want to say her name is, I'm probably wrong. And she watches him because she's always liked him since she was a child, and so she always watches him, and she kind of understands him more than anybody else does, and is the one to kind of break down those walls by being like, it's okay to freak out, it's okay to not constantly be in control, and I think you're slightly mentally ill, maybe you should probably get into therapy about that. Reckless follows Theo and Winter, who is Summer's sister from the first one. I know the names are great. And Theo is basically has a one night stand with Winter and disappears to go do his next rope around the like circuit for bull riding. And yeah, I don't think it's a spoiler to say Winter ends up pregnant, and when she tries to contact him, things go horribly wrong, and then about a year or so later he comes back and has to deal with the fact that he has a daughter that he knows nothing about because there was a snafu with the phones and he never found out. So yeah, that's all resolved very, very fast, and like that's all like talked about very, very quickly in the first, but then it's them dealing with their situation and getting to know each other really, and work out like what the hell they have to do. It's such a good book. The last one, Hopeless, is about Bo, who is the soldier of the family. He went to, I can't remember which country, and was rescuing someone, and they had to get out of there, but to do that they would have to leave the person behind, and he said, I am not leaving anyone behind, and so he stayed behind and rescued this guy and ended up trapped. And he suffered quite a lot while he was over there. He wasn't caught, but they, you know, had to survive in the desert, and he ended up with severe burns and PTSD and just isn't dealing with it very well. Then he starts to get to know Bailey, who is the bartender at the local bar and also his family's neighbour, like on the other ranch. But her family are basically trash. Like her family are the whitest of white trash. Like they are awful. Like she has even moved into a trailer on the edge of the property to get away from her own family because her own family are so horrible and abusive. And so she says to him, it's like, oh yeah, it's alright being the golden boy and everybody loves you because of your name. And he's like, nah, like nobody treats me different because of my name. And she's like, yeah, they do, and they treat me like trash because of my name. And he's like, okay, so what if I give you my name then? And they have a fake engagement, and of course they end up together. But I love these boys, I love these men, I love these characters, and I love the way that Elsie Silver writes. So yeah, definitely. I am so mad at myself that I saw other people reading these and was like, yeah, that's not for me. I should learn by now, if something sounds like it's really not for me, with some caveats, just read the damn book, Andy. Just read it. Next up is one that Becca's going to be happy about and people are probably not going to be surprised about, and that is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This book is, oh, I love it. I love the romance between these characters. I love the way the characters are written. I love the science in this. This one is the most scientific book that Ali Hazelwood has written, and that actually put a few people off with this book, but for me all it did was make it more interesting. Like I love science. Like I have a science degree and I'm so interested in the science, and the fact that the main character, the male main character, is so nerdy that he has science-based tattoos. Come on. Come on. Hook, line and sinker. Different book, but that's not the point. Yeah, I love this so much. This is about Elsie, who is a fake girlfriend. So people pay her to go to events with them as a fake girlfriend. And she has this client who's the only client that she sees like multiple times. And he is just trying to hide from his family that he doesn't have a girlfriend. And she gets on quite well with his family. They think she's a librarian, and they just really think she's great for him. Everyone except from his brother Jack, who is a bit suspicious of her and is a bit surly and a bit grumpy. But Elsie is actually a scientist, and she goes for a job, a tenure job at MIT. and who is on the board for her getting this job, but Jack, who is the client's brother. And he's like, you are lying to my brother and I'm going to expose you. And she's like, please don't. Because obviously his brother knows. And obviously she is dating his brother to like help cover for a secret that he has. But of course, because it wouldn't be a book without a twisty plot point, his brother is not contactable at the moment because he is on a retreat with his work where they're not allowed their phones and stuff. So he can't contact them until after this whole hiring process. And it's just absolute chaos, and I love it because she is so like adamant that she is not giving away his brother's secret, but she's also not a liar. Like these two things just like headbutt each other, and the way she deals with it is really clever. But at the same time, she also has this, it almost feels like an imposter syndrome where she has adapted her whole life to be what everybody else needs her to be so that people will like her. And she has to also deal with that because that's not a way to be. And Jack very much points out, like, that's not, like, don't give me an answer because you think that's the answer I want. Tell me what you actually think. And she's like, well, I don't really know what I think because I've spent so long bending to the will of others. Yeah, this is my favourite Willie Hazelwood's book so far, and I'm really looking forward to what she does in the future. We also got the finale of one of my favourite series ever, and that is Her Fierce Creatures by Maria Lewis. This book broke my heart in so many ways. This book, oh Maria, honestly, she is an absolute, like, she does not pull any punches. I don't know what's happening with my hair, I'm sorry, I'm just going to leave it. So this is the accumulation of all of these books here, and each of these books is about a different person, a different character, except 3 of them are a trilogy about one character, but you know what I mean, like different characters. And this is the book where they all come together and the big sort of war, supernatural war happens. So I can't really tell you much about it. This is a series in a world where paranormal things exist. So we've got werewolves, we've got elemental magic or elemental creatures, banshees, selkies, things like that. They all exist, and there is a government that kind of, they have their own government, as you know, always happens in these kinds of books. But there are also these 3 women known as the 3, and they're the ones that kind of run, or everybody thinks runs the show. And there's words that the 3 are dying and this whole supernatural world are going to war because the government do not want the 3 to die. They use the 3 to control everybody else. But our characters figure out that there's like something twisty and so going on, and they are out to set off a revolution, and that is what they do. That is what this book accumulates in. It's head to head with the government. I can't even remember what they're called. It's not a government. But like, that's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, it's just, like I say, it's an accumulation of this story, and she just wrecked me. She just wrecked me, so I had to go my favourites of the year. Next up is one that kind of is surprising me at the moment, and that is The American Roommate Experiment by Elena Armas. I've read 3 books by Elena Armas. The first one to this, The Spanish Love Deception, was fine, but it wasn't my favourite. And The Long Game, I DNF'd and yeeted out the house as fast as I could because I did not like that book. And yet this one of my favourites of the year. Again, the characters in this, the way she deals with mental health and physical health and disability and relationships, it was absolutely incredible. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Like, these characters were so good. So we've got Rosie, who is, obviously this one, who is the best friend of the character from the first one. And her house, her flat, like the flat above has leaked and the roof has come down. And so she is staying at her friend's flat while she's on her honeymoon. But she's also forgotten that she's told her cousin that he can come and stay. And by apartment, it's a bedsit. Like, the only separate room is the bathroom. So they are stuck living together in this tiny, tiny little apartment. And Rosie is thinking about, so she's a writer, and she's thinking about fake dating to figure out a plot point in her novel because she can't seem to get her head around it because she's not dating anybody at the time. And so Lucas is like, yeah, it's Lucas, I was right, Lucas is like, well, I'll fake date you, how about that? And she's like, oh yeah, that's great. And he's like, but we can't get like involved. We're not gonna like, you're not gonna fall in love with me. I'm not gonna fall in love with you. And she's like, yeah, okay, yeah, like I'll fall in love with you. Reader, we all know what's happening in this book is that they're falling in love with each other. But the way it's done, I just really, really loved it. I think it was done exactly the way it should have been done, which means nothing to you unless you've read this book. But you know what I mean if I've read this book. And the third act conflict was good. Normally it's like some stupid misunderstanding, whereas this one, it's not, and it's very much characters need to step back and look at themselves before they can go forward. And I love when they do that. Like, yes, give me introspection, give me healing, give me therapy. That's what we need. And then shockingly, the only historical on this, and it's not even a World War II historical, is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I'm sorry, I just whistled. Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I just whistled again. Anyway, by Bonnie Garmis. This is about our main character, whose name I can't remember, Elizabeth, who is a chemist and is working in a university in the 1960s. And she is an excellent chemist. She is, I don't know if it's, I cannot remember if it's explicitly said that she is autistic, but she's most definitely autistic coded. And she is a very like literal person, so which is why she's so good at chemistry, because chemistry is very literal. Like chemistry, if you've studied chemistry, you understand what I mean. It's very like specific. And so she's excellent at what she does, but she's always undermined because she is a woman, and then she is sexually assaulted by her boss and ends up getting fired because of what she does. And she ends up working with another scientist who she ends up in a relationship with. And this book, so it says, this book says, people always say it's about this cooking show called Supper at 6 that she ends up hosting. And again, like you see, she's got the TV on the cover. And while yes, it is, that only comes into it like maybe in the last third of the book. The first 2/3 are really about what it's like for Elizabeth to be female, possibly autistic, a scientist, someone who is smart, someone who is undermined, somebody who is looked down on for her gender, and how she navigates the world and how other people navigate her navigating the world. Again, it makes sense if you read it. And the way that different people treat her in her life. Like, so the guy that she ends up being in a relationship with, he's great. I love him. More of him, please. Everybody else can go suck a lemon. But yeah, it's really about Elizabeth's life. It's not even a slice of life, because it's like quite a broad timeline that you're following, but you're really just following Elizabeth. And I love this. I so can't wait to watch the series, because there's a series of it on Apple. And I really just don't know how to describe this without giving what I think are spoilers. I think this is a book for just about anybody to enjoy. If you have issues with racism, sexism, misogyny, sexual assault, things like that, either be aware going into it that that's what you're going to get, or just don't read it. But this book made me so mad. This book made me cry. This book made me want to go and like rebel in the streets. Like, I love this book so, so much. And I don't think another book had as much of an effect on me this year than this book did. And yeah, yeah. Didn't realise I'd left all the kind of emotionally charged ones till last, but here we go. Next one I've seen on a few people's best and a few people's worst, so it is quite a divisive book, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I tabbed this because the main character and the author of this book have the same condition that I do, which is hypermobile EDS, or hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I initially went into this to see what the rep was like, because it's not often you get disabled, like, to me, I don't really see disabled rep done overly well. It's getting better. It is getting better. My hair is getting worse. It is getting better, and seeing disabled writers write about their disability in ways that are slightly different than just like memoirs and stuff, or characters who are overcoming things is really, really nice. And that's actually one of the comments that this got from somebody, that they felt like it was a person with disability overcomes things, which I disagree with. But again, we're all reading different books. This book for me, I read because I wanted to see what the rep was like, and it ended up being my sort of foothold into high fantasy. I really, really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the fantasy side of it. I really loved the dragons. The dragons in this, it's worth reading for the dragons. Like, is the writing great? No. Is it the next best thing? No. But the dragons and the sass, I love it. And the rep, for me, as someone with ADS, I found this to be a fairly close representation, as far as it could be, of my experience of EDS. So a lot of people are saying it's like a, oh, you know, it's a shame, it's another story about somebody with a disability having to overcome something. But I don't see it that way, because it's literally, you do this or you die. You figure it out or you die. And so what Violet has to do, because she's not physically able to do these things, or not as physically able as other people, she has to use her brain. And she has to work out, like, okay, so we're going to have to do this next week, which means I'm going to have to do, like, watch while I'm doing this. Like, if she knows she's doing one thing, she thinks, okay, so I'm going to have to make sure I don't injure my knees before that. I need to watch out for my shoulders this week. Like, she plans it and she paces, and she has to really, really think about it. And that is what my experience is like with EDS. Like, there are things where it's like, I don't know how you do it. And it's like, well, because you have to. That is literally how I live my life. I manage to do things because I have to, because I have no other choice. And for me, it's things like going to work. Like, well, yeah, I have to get up and go today because I have to go to work. For Violet, it's like, well, I have to do this today because otherwise someone will kill me. Like, it's a different scenario, similar methods, as it were. And so I ended up really, really enjoying this book, and it got put on my one of my top 10 favourites of the year. I have not seen people talk about the disability rep beyond just poo-pooing it. I've not had an in-depth discussion with anybody about the disability rep, really. I do have another friend who also has hypermobile EDS, and we have discussed it, and we both just send each other memes in like TikToks constantly of Fourth Wing, and we both agree that we think the disability rep was done great in here. But again, I think it needs discussion, because it can come across one way or another depending on your experience. So yeah, but I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I cannot wait for the third one, because I've already read the second one and really, really enjoyed it. But Fourth Wing overall was better than Iron Flame, so I can actually choose a favourite in the series. I'm now realising that I said this was quite emotionally charged without actually explaining it, so it made me feel quite emotional to see the way that Violet would deal with things with her ADS, because it hits so close to home. So yeah, this did make me very emotional. Next up is another book that I said that I didn't think I was going to like, and that is A Diary of Blood by S.D. Gibson. This is a horror fantasy retelling of Dracula's Brides, and it is told from the point of view of Constanta. And now everybody says that it is told from the point of view of letters, and when somebody said that, I was like, ah, that makes sense. But to me, I didn't read it as letters, I read it as a confession or a diary. And so I don't know if that affected the way I read this, but this to me was one of the best representations of abuse that I have ever seen written. And it reminded me quite a lot of My Dark Vanessa in that way. So you're seeing the perspective, so it's second person, so it says you, like you. She's writing to Dracula, you. And this follows Constanta, who's the first bride of Dracula. And Dracula's never named, but obviously we understand that it's Dracula. And she thinks at first that they're going to have this great life together. That he loves her, she loves him. They're going to have this incredible afterlife, life, whatever, together. But things don't go as she expects, and he is in fact quite abusive. But abusive in the sinister, low-key, manipulative, psychological, emotional, all the ways that you don't see. Things that people don't understand, quite often don't understand, is in fact abuse. He never hits her. He never makes her do anything. He never makes her do anything she doesn't want to do. Things like that. He is not physically abusive. But by God, is he abusive. This, to me, is the diary or confession of a long-term abuse sufferer. That is what this is, and I think it was done unbelievably well. Either St. Gibson used to be a therapist and just consolidated all of their patients' like abuse into this book, or I really need to give St. Gibson a hug, because damn, like, anybody who has suffered abuse at the hands of a partner, a parent, a friend, anybody will understand this book in a way that you just cannot unless you've been through it. And this, again, it really hit close to home. It really hit, like, I felt this book, and it just, that's what it was to me. It was a very close look at abuse, and in the context of this fictionalised version of Dracula. I thought this was absolutely phenomenal, and I cannot wait for An Education of Malice to come out, because that is a Carmilla retelling, and I'd love to see what St. Gibson does with that. And the last book, the book that made me depressed for like, I don't know how long, is Happy Place by Emily Henry. This book carved out my insides in a way that no other book has done for so long. This book is about Harriet and Wynne, who were the perfect couple. They are in this friend group of like 6 people, and they are the it couple. They are the couple, you know, the couple that got together very early on in the friendship group and have been together forever. They are the pedestal couple that everybody in the friend group banks all of their relationships against, and just like everything always falls short. That is Harriet and Wynne. Except they're not together anymore, and they have not told their friends. And their friends want to have a holiday at the cabin that they always go to every summer. And so Harriet's like, right, I'll go, but Wynne's not coming. And they agree, like, he won't go. And she will tell them that they've broken up. When she gets there, Wynne is there, and he's like, just go along with it. And they have to pretend that they're still together, because one of their friends is having a really bad time of it, and has also then just announced that she is engaged to one of the other guys who's one of their friends, and she just wants them all to have one last great summer before sort of like everything changes. And so they have to fake date each other as exes. And this book, like, can you imagine, right, if you imagine being in a scenario where you are in a relationship with somebody who's part of your friend group, who you cannot get away from if you break up. And you pour your heart and your soul into this person, and you love them so deeply. And then that is ripped away from you and you break up. But you still have to see that person. You still have to act like you are fine. You still have to act like you can do this around all your friends. You don't want to break the friend group up. You can't break the friend group up. And everybody else thinks you're fine. And so you have to act fine, you have to act like you get along with them, you have to act like it's okay when they start seeing other people. But internally, you just feel raw, and you feel empty, and you just don't understand what's happened. That's how Harriet feels. And I have had a situation like that, and I remember how it feels, and my God, did Emily Henry hit the nail on the head with some of this. But this book as well, like, it is a second chance romance, because they, like, it's an Emily Henry's romance. They get back together, like, they get through the issues that they were having. I don't know what's going on in my hair, sorry. They get through all that. But this is also about that friendship group, and how things are changing, and how it's a kind of like, there are things in life that kind of make or break friendship groups, and there are some people that hold on to the group tighter than others, and the way that we kind of drift apart. And it's just, oh my God, this absolutely broke my heart. This book, it broke my heart, and it put it all back together again. And honestly, Emily Henry gets better with every book she writes, and if this is the newest one, I am so scared for the next one. So those are my 10-ish favourite books of the year. Please let me know if any of these were on your best or worst. If they were on your worst, be constructive or I will not engage. If you just want to bash one of my favourite books, don't. If you want to discuss what you didn't like about it and actually have a discussion, fair. Tell me if you love them. Tell me if me going on about these books had made you want to read any of them. And, you know, if you need any trigger warnings, anything like that, feel free to ask, because, again, I've read all these books. I hope you like my stats as well. Like, the stats were just very much a quick go through, and I quite enjoy getting to see those stats. There are other stats that I might follow more next year, and we'll see what I do next year. But yeah, for today, that is me. If you want to leave me an emoji, leave me one of those little statty type emojis, like the little graph things. And yeah, again, let me know if you've read any of these books, if you want to discuss any of these books in the comments below. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!